He's not a tough guy. He'd barely consider himself a criminal, but for one act of recklessness, and he's landed himself in prison. If intake and processing weren't scary enough, not to mention humiliating, his walk to the general population feels like a nightmare, as if he's living the life of somebody else. The foreboding clanking of doors locking, the cacophony of other inmates, and it suddenly hits him. He's one of them. That first night he doesn't sleep a wink, thinking all the time about what's in store for him. He's well aware there are gangs in the prison. He's watched documentaries about prison bullying, about ruthless men that will rearrange your face for merely accidentally bumping into them in the chow line. Will he have to join one of the gangs so he's protected? God forbid he'll be asked to put work in for them. Just the thought of that is unbearable. Many ex-cons will inform you that anyone who tells you they weren't the least bit afraid or intimidated when entering prison for the first time in their life is lying. Sure, for many people it might not be as bad as men shouting at you from their cells as you walk down the landing, all saying they'll do unspeakable things to you, but it's also no walk in the park. What we described to you in the intro is kind of a generic experience for inmates incarcerated in US prisons. So what you might experience in a prison in Papua New Guinea or Sweden or Paraguay might be very different from what you'd experience in a lockup in, say, Arizona. In Norway, you might see convicted killers making a communal meal and chopping onions with a 6-inch knife. Or in Brazil, you could see prisoners walking around with weapons and not even hiding them. Over in the UK, you might get prison gangs, but you also might see prisoners sticking together based more on where they come from, unlike the US, where race is a big factor. No one prison is the same, but in many places you're likely going to come across a prison gang, the topic of today's show. Okay, so now let's have a look at some of those gangs. Number 4. The Aryan Brotherhood. When we're talking about the most feared prison gangs, of course we're going to discuss the country that has by a long way the biggest prison population in the world. In fact, thanks to the popularity of US movies and TV shows, we're quite sure all of you non-Americans are quite familiar with violence inside US prisons. In the US, where you're incarcerated will determine who the most powerful gang is. There will likely be a mix of powerful gangs, but that doesn't mean they're always fighting. In fact, to keep the peace and keep the flow of contraband flowing through the prisons, it's best not to cause a huge stir. That only leads to cell searches and sometimes quite lengthy lockdowns. This is not good for business. One of those gangs that does a huge amount of business behind prison walls is the Aryan Brotherhood. It's reported that in California, this gang attempted to create an army, always looking for new recruits, like the guy described at the start of the show. In terms of crime, they have their fingers in a lot of pies. Over the decades, they've evolved from a bunch of angry Irish bikers who called themselves the Diamond Tooth Gang to an organized crime outfit. They go back a long way, starting in 1964. The reason for the beginning of the pack was to fight back against other gangs, such as the Black Guerrilla family, another very feared prison and street gang. As smaller gangs amalgamated, they grew larger and larger, started getting involved in drugs, drug trafficking, firearms trafficking, extortion, robberies, and violence. A lot of violence. Much of their infamy stemmed from instances of extreme violence inside prisons. If you're a part of this gang, you might at times have had to cause another person a serious injury, if not kill them. Even though the prison population doesn't have more of them than any other gangs, the FBI has said a disproportionate number of murders are committed by them. The last available statistics we can find say they constitute only 1% of the US federal prison population, but are behind 18 to 25% of murders. And that's why they make this list. There are plenty of white supremacist gangs in the US, but we'd say this one is the most feared. They have a kind of motto which is blood in, blood out, which should mean that once you've joined and spilled blood, or made your bones as the expression goes, the only way to leave is to die. That's not always the case, but just turning around to them while you're still locked up and saying, "Hey guys, I think I had enough. Godspeed fellas, toodaloo," will very likely lead to a stiff reprimand. By that, we mean your blood will be spilled or your life will be taken. What was different about them in the prison system is they started getting organized. They created a hierarchical power structure similar to that of the American Mafia, people who they did business with after offering protection to Mafia boss John Gotti when he was locked up. Of the 15 to 20,000 members, both inside and outside of prison, they're all Caucasian. You need to be to join, and you also have to have served time or are currently serving time. By the 1980s, they introduced a 12-man council for votes on various things, and that was overseen by a 3-man council. It was this kind of organization that bolstered their power. Members were also asked to read books such as Sun Tzu's Art of War and Machiavelli's The Prince, books that talk about warfare tactics, power, and keeping control. As for maintaining control, former members said that they learned from these books, if you're going to commit an act of violence, make it vicious, make it a spectacle of fear. This is a snippet from that book, The Prince, that gang members should have read. People should either be caressed or crushed. If you do them minor damage, they'll get their revenge, but if you cripple them, there's nothing they can do. If you need to injure someone, do it in such a way that you do not have to fear their vengeance. Once you've been sworn in, you're very likely going to have to hurt another inmate or even an officer, although violence against officers will always cause them a lot of trouble. Attacking someone else is sometimes called putting in work, and the person that gives the green light for this is called the shot caller. This is not, however, only something that happens in the Aryan Brotherhood, they just wrote the rulebook. They've become so powerful and so scrutinized in their activities in prison that it might be difficult for officers to know who calls the shots, and if they do find out, that person might be looking at a lengthy time separated from the general population. Sure, there is racism in the gang, after all, they are white supremacists, but these people are more concerned about their profitable crime ventures than concentrating on spewing racial hatred. According to experts and former members, cash is king, and they'll do anything to ensure their operation remains intact, including making a murder so brutal it sends a strong message to others. This makes them one of the most feared prison gangs in the world. Number 3. The Mexican Mafia. This gang is also known as a prison gang, as opposed to a regular street gang, although like the Aryan Brotherhood, they don't just operate inside prison walls. As far as we can tell, these two extremely powerful gangs have a truce going, so they're not currently at war. While you've all heard of the various Mexican drug cartels, this gang is an American gang. One that some people say is even more powerful than the Aryan Brotherhood, at least in the California prison system. It doesn't seem to be anywhere near as big though, with roughly 500 full-time members and another 1,000 associates. As for its affiliations with other dangerous gangs, well, it has many. Like other prison gangs, it started because groups of people, namely Hispanic people, wanted strength in numbers inside prisons. That was way back in the 1950s, but when the gang grew in size, it got involved with illicit drug trafficking and arms trafficking, human trafficking, extortion, murder, and more. Inside the prison, they were renowned for violence. As their power grew, they became more of a danger to other inmates. Many of those inmates were Hispanics themselves, and they also wanted strength in numbers. Some of them got together and named themselves the Nuestra Familia. This gang became the mortal enemy of the Mexican Mafia. The conflict between the two has led to the loss of many lives and will continue to do so. They don't have a strict hierarchical structure, but a newbie might be told by older members to put in some work and hurt or kill another inmate. If that request is turned down, it might just happen that the budding member himself is killed, or at least hurt badly. If there's going to be a hit on an established member, the green light has to be given by 3 other members, men who've been in the gang for a while. Again, there's a blood oath you have to swear, so you spill blood to get in and you ain't getting out easily. People do get out, of course, but not without some risk to themselves. There are rules to follow, with the obvious that you never admit there's a Mexican Mafia when talking to the cops. You should also value the gang over family, or God for that matter, and when you're in prison, you should forget your beef with any other members that you both had in the streets. If you want to get in, you must be sponsored by another member, and the rub is, if you violate the rules, he's the guy that'll kill you. Still, the rules also state that you should respect all members as friends and protect them as if they were your own flesh and blood. They've had plenty of conflicts, including a very bloody one with the Mexican drug cartel, the Los Zetas. But in Southern California at least, they command the respect of all the smaller Hispanic gangs. Then there's the gang's relationship they have with the very large and very violent street gang called Mara Salvatrucha, aka MS-13. This gang is transnational and its power structure is complicated or non-existent, but according to the Justice Department, its members in California prisons are aligned with the Mexican Mafia. Other allies include a very dangerous Sinaloa cartel, the Italian-American Mafia, and the Texas Mexican Mafia, among others. On top of that, the FBI has said that the Mexican Mafia has even paid the Aryan Brotherhood for contract murders. Now let's look outside the USA to gang members that have mostly experienced a kind of poverty not often seen in America. Number 2. The Numbers Gang. So if you're in this gang, you might belong to the 26s, 27s, or the 28s. They're a South African gang and can be found in most prisons throughout the country. They're not hard to make out because most of the time they don't exactly hide their number, since it'll be tattooed where someone can see it. The Numbers Gang is more a prison gang than it is a street gang. Unlike the USA, where you'll find quite a large number of different prison gangs, in South Africa, one of the most violent places on earth in terms of murder, the Numbers Gang is pretty much running every prison. The inmates, at least. This is what makes them powerful. Like many gangs, they're organized and follow a top-down structure. If you're a newbie to prison, you might find yourself having to join one of these gangs. Sure, that might not happen, but it's very likely that if you don't join, you'll be supporting the gangs in some way. If you refuse to join and refuse to pay your support money, well, life might be tough inside prison. When we said structured, we meant it. Right at the top you have the government of the gang that runs things. These belong to the number 1s, and they're higher than the number 2s. Inside both of these structures you'll find judges and doctors and soldiers and lawyers and clerks and captains and more. The rule is you don't step out of line, but you also do what's expected of you even if you hold a high position. Heavy is the head that wears the crown in this gang. In short, the 26s control wealth, and that's why you'll often see a money sign tattooed on them. The 27s protect and enforce the many rules of the gangs, and the 28 mostly concentrate on spilling blood. It's all very complicated. According to Human Rights Watch, these gangs go back to the mid-1800s, so it's not surprising they've built a complex structure. There's been a lot of time for expansion, so make no mistake, this gang is all over the prison system in South Africa. Inside prison, they actually do provide some support, given you join the gang at the bottom and follow the many rules. The problem is, you might sometimes have to do things you don't want to do, such as stab a prison guard. The Numbers Gang have attacked so many guards, it's a wonder anyone wants the job in South Africa. Some prisoners have also said that within the gangs, the higher-ups have done things like demanded cash from them to be allowed a visit from a relative. So it's certainly not all support. There's also the matter of physical abuse, which happens often within the gang. The scariest thing about the Numbers Gang is the initiation, something we imagine most of you viewers couldn't imagine being put through. This is how the initiation is for the 28s. When a new inmate arrives, he gets asked a question by a gang member. This member is called the Daiglas, meaning binoculars, because he'll have watched how the prisoner acted during his first few days. The new inmate is asked what he would do if the Daiglas asked him to help him during a rainstorm. The storm might be making him wet and cold. Would he A. offer to share his umbrella, or B. join him in the pouring rain? If he answers A, he will become a slave, sometimes a sex slave, and if he answers B, he can join the gang. It's not easy though, because to join you'll have to stab another inmate, a prison guard, or even a warden. In this respect, once you're in, you'll have more time added to your sentence. The doctor of the gang will measure the length of the knife, so that pretty much determines how hurt or dead the victim will be. After this deed is complete, the inmate then has to undergo a kind of initiation and get hit twice with a pipe. It's then determined if he should become a warrior 28 or a lower-ranking 28, basically a slave. To give you an idea of how violent a gang member can be, one man named John Mongrel joined at age 14 and immediately stabbed another prisoner through the heart. He killed a lot more people in prisons, and it's reported he was involved with the murders of around 1,000 people. He also once cut the eye out of a guard and committed many brutal assaults. Of course, if you break the rules, you will get punished. One punishment is having your throat slit. Another is to ensure you'll be infected with HIV. And that's done so brutally, we won't go into details here about how it's performed. They call the punishment the slow puncture. Lesser transgressions of the rules will result in getting beaten with things such as padlocks or sticks. Another punishment might not involve getting hurt, but you may have to murder someone who's not affiliated with any gang. Perhaps some fairly innocent dude like the one in the intro. All this sounds incredibly awful, and that's why the Numbers Gang makes the list. The next gang is arguably even worse. Number 1. Premier Comando de Capital, PCC. It's said to be the most powerful and ruthless gang in Brazil, inside and outside of prison. Lately, 75 members of this gang escaped from a prison in nearby Paraguay. The drug business is good in Paraguay, so PCC members have operations there. The problem is, some prisons in this fairly poor country are what you might call out of control. Prisoners with influence and money might have a suite replete with a large TV in their cell, while those on the bottom of the pile literally have to scavenge for food in the trash. They sleep on the walkways where men sit taking drugs or sharpening their knives, and no prison officer can do anything about it. After those 75 members fled the prison, critics said there was nothing the authorities could do to stop them. They just have too much power, and there are too many police and prison guards that are poor enough and scared enough to be susceptible to bribery. After more PCC members started filling up prisons in Paraguay, violence broke out. The local gangs soon became outnumbered because of PCC's aggressive recruiting policy. They call being recruited receiving a baptism. If you become a member, you'll have learned the PCC statute. And if in any way you break the rules, it's punishable only by death. In 2019, at San Pedro de Quemandio Regional Jail in Paraguay, a riot broke out that was started by the PCC. During the mayhem, some gang members videoed themselves with their cell phones armed with giant machetes and swords. You might ask how someone manages to sneak in such a large weapon to a prison, but the fact is, the gang's so powerful they can get weapons brought in for them. It's basically lawless in those prisons. Most of the violence in that riot wasn't focused on your average inmate, but on rival gang members. In all, 10 were killed that day and 15 more injured. 6 of the dead were beheaded, 3 were burned, and the other prisoner was shot to death. So, when we're talking about violence, this gang goes to extremes, more so than any other gang on the list. It's their sheer strength outside prison and their willingness to go to extremes inside prison that makes them a force to be reckoned with. But their power on the outside can't be underestimated. This is how one top cop described how they work. There's no way that anyone can stand up to this. They identify your family, they coerce your relatives, judges, prosecutors, and police. Of the 20,000 people belonging to this gang, around 6,000 of them are in prison, not only in Brazil and Paraguay, but also Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Peru. In 2006, PCC gang members were sent on a rampage in the city of Sao Paulo. They attacked any public authority they deemed their enemy. Around 40 members of law enforcement were murdered. Inside prisons, they killed 8 prison guards and 17 prisoners died. In 71 prisons, there were rebellions. All of this was orchestrated by gang members using cell phones in their prison cells. In 2012, after gang members were killed by cops, the order was given to kill 1 police for every dead gang member. For about 30 days, 1 or 2 cops were brutally slain daily. We could go on and on because this gang has been behind many bloody rebellions inside and outside prison. We'd argue that this is the most feared prison gang in the world. Now you need to watch Most Horrific Crimes, the Italian Mafia, or have a look at The White American Who Climbed the Ranks of the Chinese Mafia, the White Devil.